Everyone has a take on this. Your parents say buy. Your broke friend says rent and invest the difference. Your coworker who just closed on a house says the market is perfect right now. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, you're trying to make one of the biggest financial decisions of your life with nothing but opinions and gut feelings. So forget the opinions. Let's talk about two people who made different choices. Same income, same city, same starting point, and what actually happened to their money over time. Not month one, not year one, the full picture. Sarah rents, David buys. Both earn $62,000 a year. Both live in the same mid-sized city. Both had $65,000 saved before making their housing decision. Both were looking for the same thing, a 3-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood with a decent commute. One of them is quietly building wealth. The other thinks they are. And by year 10, the difference between their net worth is not a rounding error. It is a number that changes how the rest of their lives look. David puts 20% down on a $310,000 home. That is his entire $65,000. Plus he borrows a little to cover closing costs. He takes a 30-year fixed mortgage at 6.5%. His principal and interest payment comes out to about $1,566 a month. Add property taxes at around $260 a month and homeowner's insurance at $130, and David is spending roughly $1,960 per month before he touches a single thing that breaks. Sarah rents a comparable place for $1,450 a month. She takes her $65,000 and puts it into a low-cost index fund tracking the S&P 500, which has historically averaged around 8% annually. Her monthly costs are over $500 less than David's. No mortgage, no property taxes, no maintenance, no landlord calling her asking if she read the HOA rules. On paper, Sarah looks like she made the smarter call. But there is something happening inside David's mortgage that most people never stop to examine. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Every single payment David makes is buying him a fraction of something that exists in the real world. A physical asset in a specific zip code that other people need and will pay for. Sarah's payments buy her 12 more months of not being homeless. Both are necessary. Only one of them compounds. Let's look at the first 3 years honestly, because this is where most people stop the analysis and declare a winner too early. In year 1 of David's mortgage, he makes about $18,800 in total mortgage payments. Of that, roughly $15,900 goes to the bank as interest. Only around $2,900 chips away at what he actually owes. That interest payment does not come back. It does not build equity. It does not appreciate. It disappears the same way rent does, except nobody frames it that way. Add property taxes, insurance, and maintenance at 1% of home value annually, and David has spent close to $28,000 in year 1 and built maybe $3,000 in equity through principal reduction alone. Sarah spent $17,400 in rent. Her $65,000 investment, completely untouched, has grown to about $70,200 at 8%. She came out ahead in year 1 and it was not particularly close. By year 3, Sarah has paid roughly $52,200 in total rent. Her investment has grown to around $81,900. She has not added a single dollar to the account. It is just compounding quietly while her landlord handles the leaking gutters. David has spent over $84,000 across his mortgage, closing costs, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. His equity from principal payments is around $9,800. His home has appreciated, though. At a conservative 3.5% annually, his $310,000 home is now worth about $342,000. Subtract what he still owes, and his total equity is somewhere around $51,000. Sarah has $81,900 in investments and owns nothing. David has spent more and built $51,000 in equity. Through year 3, Sarah is still ahead on a pure number basis, but the gap is much smaller than it looked on day 1, and the trajectory from here is about to shift. Here is the part of the rent versus buy conversation that almost never gets mentioned. Not the down payment, not the mortgage rate. The direction each cost moves over time. Sarah's rent started at $450. At a modest 3.5% annual increase, it becomes $1,536 in year 2, then $1,590, then $1,647. By year 10, Sarah is paying about $980 a month. She has crossed David's original housing cost, and she is not building anything with it. David's mortgage payment is $1,566. It is $1,566 in month 1. It is $1,566 in month 60. It is $1,566 in month 200. For 30 years, that number does not move. Inflation quietly erodes the real cost of that payment every single year. The dollar he uses to pay his mortgage in year 20 is worth less than the dollar he used in year 1, but the mortgage does not know that. The payment stays fixed, while everything around it gets more expensive. This is the mechanism that turns a mortgage from a liability into an advantage over time. Most people know it vaguely, but have never seen what it actually looks like in numbers. By year 8, Sarah's monthly rent has climbed past $1,850. She is now paying more than David every single month, getting nothing back, and her rent will keep going. David's payment is still $566, and the portion going to principal gets a little bigger every month. The tide is fully turned, and it happened without a dramatic moment, just quietly, the way most financial shifts do. Now, let's talk about the part of homeownership that the internet loves to dismiss. Leverage. David did not buy a $65,000 asset. He bought a $310,000 asset using $65,000. That distinction matters enormously, and here's exactly why. When David's home appreciates 3.5% in year 1, his home gains about $10,850 in value. He earned that $10,850 on a $310,000 asset, not on his $65,000 down payment. That is a return of nearly 17% on his actual cash invested, before you account for any principal paydown. Sarah earned 8% on her $65,000 that year. That is about $5,200. David's leveraged position earned more than twice what Sarah's unleveraged index fund earned in raw dollar terms in year 1 alone. And the asset he is leveraged on is not sitting in a server somewhere. It is a physical property with a roof over it that other families in his city also need. As long as people need housing, that underlying asset has demand behind it. This is the single biggest mathematical advantage that homeownership has over renting and investing the difference, and it almost never appears in the monthly payment comparison that everyone focuses on. Let's run the full 10-year picture now, because this is where the real story lives. Over 10 years, Sarah has paid approximately $204,000 in total rent and renter's insurance. She owns nothing at the end of year 10, but her $65,000 index fund, assuming she never touched it, has grown to around $140,300. That is a solid outcome. David has paid significantly more. Mortgage payments, taxes, insurance, maintenance, closing costs. The number over 10 years lands somewhere around $295,000. On the surface, David spent $90,000 more than Sarah. That sounds bad until you look at what it bought. His home, appreciating at 3.5% per year, is now worth approximately $437,000. His mortgage balance after 10 years of payments has dropped to around $261,000. David's equity is approximately $176,000. Net the spending against the asset value, and here's where they actually stand. Sarah spent $204,000 and has $140,300. David spent $295,000 and has $176,000 in equity in an appreciating asset. David is ahead by roughly $35,000 to $55,000, depending on how you account for the tax deduction on mortgage interest, local appreciation rates, and actual maintenance costs. But more importantly, David's gap continues to widen from year 10 onward, while Sarah's does not. Every year from here, David's balance drops a little more, his home value climbs a little more, and Sarah's rent goes up a little more. The compounding works differently for each of them, and the compounding is not in Sarah's favor anymore. By year 20, David's home could be worth somewhere around $618,000. He still owes roughly $214,000. His equity is over $400,000. His mortgage payment is still $1,566 a month. Sarah's rent, growing at 3.5% per year, has crossed $2,800 a month, and she is still paying someone else every single month with no finish line in sight. By year 30, David makes his final payment. His home could be worth over $740,000. He owns it completely. His monthly housing cost drops to taxes, insurance, and maintenance. That is around $600 to $700 a month in today's terms. A retired person, or anyone living on a fixed income, can absorb $700 a month in housing costs. Sarah, at year 30, is paying somewhere around $3,800 a month in rent, every month, with no end date. If she is retired and living on savings and Social Security, nearly $4,000 a month going to a landlord before she buys groceries is a very different retirement than David's. That difference is not abstract. It is the difference between a retirement that feels stable and one that feels precarious. And it traces all the way back to which direction each person's housing cost was moving. But here is what this script would be leaving out if it stopped there. Buying does not always win. There are specific conditions where renting is the sharper financial decision, and pretending otherwise does a disservice to anyone actually trying to figure this out. If you are staying somewhere for less than 5 years, buying is almost certainly a losing trade. Closing costs on entry, agent commissions on exit, minimal principal reduction in the early years. You will likely leave with less money than if you had rented. The break-even point on most purchases is somewhere between 5 and 7 years. Below that threshold, rent. If you are in a high-cost market where the price-to-rent ratio is deeply distorted, the math breaks down for buyers. When a 2-bedroom costs $1.1 million to buy and $2,800 to rent, the numbers do not support ownership. The monthly cost to own, even with appreciation, may never catch up to the returns available from investing the difference at scale. If your career requires flexibility, if you move for opportunities every few years, if your life is genuinely in motion, the transaction costs of buying and selling repeatedly will eat your equity faster than appreciation can replace it. Renting in that scenario is not a default, it is the correct answer. And if you are the rare person who actually takes every dollar saved by renting and puts it into an index fund and never touches it no matter what, your outcome looks meaningfully better than most rent versus buy models show. The gap narrows considerably when the discipline is genuine and sustained. The problem is that most people are not that person. The savings from renting get absorbed into things that feel necessary at the time. A newer car, dining out more, a vacation that made sense in the moment. The investment account that was supposed to grow quietly either never gets funded or gets raided when life happens. Home ownership is a forced savings mechanism. The payment is not optional. The equity builds whether you are paying attention or not. That is not a behavioral argument for buying. It is a real observation about how most people actually behave with discretionary cash versus committed housing payments. The real mistake in this conversation is not renting. It is not buying either. It is treating a 30-year financial decision like a month-to-month comparison, looking at the lease versus the mortgage statement and stopping there. The monthly number is not the cost. The trajectory of that number over a decade, 2 decades, a retirement, that is the cost. David did not win because buying always wins. He won because he locked in a fixed cost in an environment where every other cost keeps rising. He won because leverage let a $65,000 investment earn returns on a $310,000 asset. He won because every payment moved him closer to a moment where his housing costs would effectively disappear. And at the exact moment that happened, Sarah got her next rent increase notice. The question was never rent or buy. The question was always, what does this decision cost me over 30 years? And almost nobody is asking it that way. Run the full numbers, not just month one. The only math that matters is the math at the end.